just pure and simple. I mean, the ability to go and do locums assignment as a CRNA there's no shortage of that out there. And so I think because that's sort of an attractive piece for a lot of CRNAs, it's really hard to ignore that when they're, contemplating, do they continue to just stay as a full-time W-2 or do we convert to a 1099 and take on locums assignments? And so, there's definitely some who will ask those questions more about the work-life balance and those other additional perks such as PTO and 401k, and is there a signing bonus even, or whatever it may be. But by and large, I would say, easily 95, 98% of the people we talk to, one of the first or second question is, tell me the compensation package, and that will tell me whether I want to continue the conversation or not.
Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. Today, I have a very special episode for you. As anesthesia and medical providers, we often live in the operating room, and when it comes time for a change of scenery, we go to Gasworks to find a new job, or we answer one of the 50 texts or emails that we just received in the last hour from our recruiters or random locum agencies. But today, we get to dive into the other side of the anesthesia world. Today, we get to look at our profession from the corporate side of things. I'm proud to introduce you to Daniel Myers. Daniel is the Director of Recruitment for CRH Anesthesia and CRH Medical. Prior to joining the team, he had a career in both recruitment and operations, working for two different companies. He manages both strategy and process as it relates to recruitment and anesthesia staffing in over 18 states. He has an undergraduate in Salt Lake City, Utah. He resides in Nashville, Tennessee, and he has a wife and 5 children, all under the age of 5. Daniel, it's great to have you on the show today. I'm glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. And point of clarification, my oldest just turned 6 a few days ago. So now we can say we have 5, 6 and under. So we'll make it a little bit better. Give us some breathing room there. So.
Hey, it's all I can do just to juggle 1 2-year-old. So
I understand.
So let's get the ball rolling and tell me, so what is your full-time job and what exactly do you do?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, I am Director of Recruiting for CRH Anesthesia, CRH Medical. And so my job consists of, in the present state, of having a team of recruiters and recruitment coordinators that are responsible for the recruitment of CRNAs and anesthesiologists across 18 states, primarily in outpatient care. But we also, on the CRH Medical side, get into some of our outpatient banding clinics, which is responsible for the recruitment of nurse practitioners as well as general surgeons on that side. And so we do a little mixture of everything, if you will. And of course, non-clinical, we've got corporate positions that we're responsible for recruiting for as well. So a little bit of everything in terms of recruiting for healthcare and then working closely with operations to help make sure that the staffing and all that fun stuff is where it should be.
So it sounds like, family, kids at home, you definitely seem to have a full plate at work. One of my favorite questions is, what's your driving force? Why do you do what you do? Like, what's your main priority and value in life?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I sometimes it's difficult to answer. I think, obviously, taking care of my family is number one priority. That probably goes without stating. So, but, for me, I've always been sort of I think what gets me up in the morning and gets me driving is finding ways to improve, not just process, but just overall individuals and entities, if you will. I think that we all have room for improvement and advancement, not only in our individual lives, but in the places where we work and how we function. And so for me, being a contributor in that sense to help make things better is really what just fuels me every day and everything I do. So yeah.
That is excellent. I'm a big fan of it. I love to have a good project I can sink my teeth into. Just the satisfaction of a job well done to me
Yes.
is most of, not to sound silly, but that's most of the reward in
Yeah.
itself.
It
So,
is. Yeah.
so recruiting is an interesting job. How did you dip your toes into it for the first time? What made you want to be a recruiter to start with?
Well, I always I say to people when they ask questions like this, I go, I don't know if anyone ever got into recruiting voluntarily. That was sort of they fell into it. But maybe, perhaps. At least that's the story for me. So, I had actually been working in human resources for a couple of years. I worked in HR and retail before I even got into healthcare even, and then got into HR in the healthcare sector and really just sort of by accident stumbled into recruiting. And so without belaboring that long journey, what I'll say is was on a small project team to find ways to improve recruiting for a company I was working at. And in the process of working on that project team, there were leaders that I was fortunate enough to work for at that company that sort of recognized the skill set that I had prior to me even understanding that I had a skill set for recruiting. And so gave me an opportunity. And that was over 7 years ago. And, it's been sort of a rocket pace movement since then. So that's kind of how I got into it, I guess.
It's interesting because you're not just a general recruiter. You're kind of the grand poobah of all recruiters. Organized, you're the guy.
Yeah, that's what they say. Yeah, I mean, it's funny to imagine that because I think my path to the point of where I am now is nothing short of a blessing and a miracle. I think it's just been, so to your point, to hear sort of people give me those sort of accolades, if you will, and hoorahs, it's kind of it's funny at times because I'm like, man, it doesn't seem that long ago I was, sitting in a cubicle in HR trying to put together some data sheets. So it's all happened very, very fast. I'm very fortunate. So
For all the anesthesia providers listening, what is it actually like to be a recruiter for MDs, anesthesiologists, AAs? Like, what's the average pay for a recruiter? Is there any bonuses or perks to the job? What kind of keeps them going? Like your general recruiter.
yeah. So, leadership and recruitment are sort of separate in that structure. But for recruiters, honestly, it varies depending on the company that you're with. So and to add another layer to that, it varies depending on if you're a locums recruiter, if you're what we call a perm placement recruiter. So, on the perm side, a lot of times you can get recruiters, senior recruiters who can make somewhere between, 75 and 100K in base. And then they have commission on top of that. And then, for locums recruiters, a lot of times they have either a flat base, whatever it may be, or they have a really small base with a very high, I guess you can call it commission plan, but it's based on how many shifts they can get those locum providers to work. So sometimes locum recruiters will make a low base of $40,000 or $45,000 and then add on commission. But I personally know of recruiters in anesthesia who have made well over $250,000 or $300,000 in a year, depending on the type of structure they're working for.
It definitely explains the number of reach outs that we all get on a daily basis.
It helps. It helps you get there. Yeah. Yeah.
Your job is mostly from home, even though, it's office. So with our current remote culture that we've had, I guess, ever since COVID, how do you manage your demanding family life with your demanding job? Do you have any tips for balancing this kind of remote, I guess, work lifestyle?
Yeah. It definitely has its challenges. I think from a unwinding perspective, if you will, a mental state perspective. For me, it was a big adjustment going to primary remote. And I think to sort of give an example for that is, for me, the drive home from the office to home was sort of the unwinding period for me, can sort of rest and get myself in order before I see the kids and stuff. And here working remote, there is no unwinding period. You go from the upstairs office to the downstairs living space where everybody is. And that 5-second walk is sometimes not enough time to sort of unwind everything that's dealt with that day. So it definitely has its challenges, but it has its rewards as well. I mean, the opportunity for me to take that 5-second trip downstairs and have lunch with the kids, whereas otherwise I would sit in my car and have lunch or, go out with some, coworkers or something for lunch, makes it a lot more rewarding. And hopefully the kids think that too as they get older. So, but we'll see. Yeah.
And it's definitely nice working from home, and I do a little bit from home as well. And it's challenging to, I guess, get the family to understand, present, but not available.
Yeah. That was a challenge for a bit. Thankfully our kids are really great, of course, biased, but I mean, I think they're some of the greatest kids ever. So, for me, they've caught on quickly to what's allowed, what isn't allowed. And so, it still has its challenges every now and then, as you can imagine, but for the most part, they do real well.
So of all the guests that we've actually had on this show, you probably have the best 50,000-foot view of the anesthesia profession, the emerging trends, and our market. I guess for a multi-point question here, is CRNA demand going up or down? And have you seen any concerning trends within the anesthesia community?
Yeah. So, I think the demand has definitely probably gone up in the sense to where, I think it goes into the second part of your question is the trend. I think the trend right now is definitely completely compensation based. That's usually the number one that's asked before we even move forward with any sort of dialogue with a CRNA is that's the first thing they want to get out of the way immediately is what's the compensation package, right? And so because of that, I think the trends that we're seeing primarily in the locum space, we're seeing a lot of locums, CRNAs doing locums work. A lot of companies are utilizing locums probably now more than ever at a higher rate than they have before. And so the trend into that has sort of put all of us who are in the anesthesia space at this, I wouldn't say a pause, but just at sort of a standstill of what do we do? What's the future for this? And how do we adjust because of this demand and this trend that's happening in the market? And I don't think it's unique to inpatient or outpatient or to CRH and no one else. It's really what's happening across the market, across the country.
It's challenging because, you say the first question they ask is what's the compensation? Like, really funny. And maybe I'm just at a different point in my career or my priorities are different ever since having kids. Because when I first started, what are you paying? I don't want to hear $1 less.
Yeah, sure.
But now I'm kind of, yes, of course you need to pay me something, but I'm more about quality of life and all that. So like to me, I'm more, what's the culture like? What's the work day like? What's the work environment like? I can take a little bump on pay. Do you have a good 401k plan? A lot of CRNAs and anesthesia providers in general, they don't really understand the back end of, they look at a dollar amount only.
Sure.
Look at, hey, what are the benefits? What are the other perks of the job? And they don't realize for one that actually has a dollar amount from the company itself. And, it's like, they're just so focused on the money, and the money is great, but like, to me, I'm like, what's your values? What's your goals? And then everything else kind of falls in line, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, definitely there are some who will approach it from that perspective. I think the driving factor in compensation, like I said, and the reason it's the main, the number one question they ask right away is, I think because of just the overwhelming increase that we've seen in locums work. Just pure and simple. The ability to go and do locums assignment as a CRNA there's no shortage of that out there. And so I think because that's sort of an attractive piece for a lot of CRNAs, it's really hard to ignore that when they're, contemplating, do they continue to just stay as a full-time W-2 or do we convert to a 1099 and take on locums assignments? And so, there's definitely some who will ask those questions more about the work-life balance and those other additional perks such as PTO and 401k, and is there a signing bonus even or whatever it may be. But by and large, I would say, easily 95, 98% of the people we talk to, one of the first or second question is, tell me the compensation package, and that will tell me whether I want to continue the conversation or not. So
it's funny because as providers, they teach us how to do anesthesia so well, but they don't actually teach you really the business of the back end of the anesthesia. So it's hard because I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with CRNAs where they're like, I want $250 an hour and I want to go to this one site. And I'm like, well, this one site only does 8 cases and it's got a poor payer mix, and our billing is only X, we're only getting reimbursed, I don't know, $250 an hour. I'm like, it doesn't make sense to pay you this if we're going to lose money on the deal. You're going to get $1,500, but we're only going to get reimbursed $1,200. And they don't, that the problem is a lot of them don't understand the back end of the billing or, how time units work when it comes to like OR cases. That's one of the things I personally always strive with whenever I talk to people and we have a pay disagreement on something. I'm like, well, let me show you the math behind it. And, and it's really great because, probably, 2 of 5 are just like, I don't want to hear it, but the 3 of the first 5 that actually listen, they go, oh, well, I don't like your answer, but at least you understand. It makes it look like, you're not being, greedy. And it's like, this is kind of why some of the decisions are made the way it was. Cause I know when I first started, I was like, I want this X amount. And I didn't have any reasoning why. I would pick almost arbitrary numbers. So now, like when you negotiate, now I kind of look more of, well, what is your actual value? Not what's my ego value, but what's the actual value of what you're producing out there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So as far as CRNAs go, so you work with CRNAs, MDs, AAs, all of the above. Have you noticed any difference in professionalism or recruiting with them or in talking to them?
I think all of them are very, very professional. Of course, there's a caliber of experience that come with MDs and CRNAs that's different from the AA side, of course. But all of them are extremely professional. We enjoy working the majority of our working personnel, if you will, the CRNAs. Although we do have sites that are care team model that have that we work with, and some of our sites actually are MD only. There's not a lot, but there are a few of our sites that are MD only. So in terms of AAs, of course, there's very few states that actually can license them. It's well under 20, I think even maybe under 15 that can actually use AAs. So CRH only has two of those states that can actually, two of our 18 states employ AAs. So the vast majority of our personnel are CRNAs. But I don't really notice in terms of our communication with them major differences that stick out to me between any of those types of providers. So
Okay. And then, I guess we're always bombarded with, recruiters. And a lot of times, if you're looking for a recruiter, it's the greatest thing in the world. But if you have a stable job, it can get kind of annoying. Like even in my personal experience, when I've been trying to talk to people, I've had people be short or rude or unprofessional, I guess, with me. They always talk about how the anesthesia world is very small.
yeah.
Does being, I guess, unpolite to people on the phone, does that have any ripples on the back end, or does it just kind of go, maybe I'm not going to call this person again?
Yeah, I think it definitely affects the organization in which you are communicating that way too. So if you're a CRNA and you have a conversation with a recruiter and it ends in sort of a negative tone, so to speak, then the overwhelming feedback will be not to reach out to that provider going forward because of that. In terms of what it can do outside of that organization, not, I don't think it necessarily has really that much effect, to be completely transparent and honest. Companies do talk, recruiters across, different organizations within the space definitely communicate and talk, but not usually so much about, oh, you should avoid this provider because they're, not very friendly on the phone. So, I with that being said, nonetheless, I think it's still important to have a level of professionalism and courtesy when communicating with anybody, just because it does help. And as recruiters transition, because sometimes they do, recruiters sometimes swap companies all the time, and a lot of times they bring their knowledge of that prior book of business with them. And so, you never know where a recruiter today is going to be a year from now or 6 months from now. So it's always important to have those conversations in a positive way so that you can carry that on long after that person's no longer at that company.
They say attitude's a little thing that makes a really big difference. Yeah, I remember when I was at one of my previous companies, I was actually calling to offer a CRNA a job, and he was like in the Midwest, and we were like, it was a great area. He was a good leader. And I called him and I was like, "Hey man, how's it going? I'm Matt. I'm with X Anesthesia." I'm like, we know each other from back in the day. And he thought I was a recruiter, and it was like incredibly rude and just slammed the phone off. And I'm like,
Oh, wow.
and, I was like, and I was aware of the job he had, and I was calling to offer him a way better position. And I'm like, well, I guess,
No.
I leave a bad taste in my mouth. I was like, I guess I'm not going to do it. Yeah, you want a little bit of customer service.
Yeah, that's true. I haven't had anybody ever slam the phone on me or hang up on me per se. You get those that are a little, can be challenging sometimes, but I think, maybe this is just a very new age way, or if you want to say of looking at it, I suppose, but you never know what people are going through. Honestly, as cliche as that may sound and very self-made, it's still a truth. There's still a level of truth there. I know I've had very frustrating days. And so I feel like a lot of times when people are that agitated, it's usually what I direct my team at least is, hey, don't take it personal. They don't even know who you are. Just realize that this is, they're probably going through something, and let's see if we can try to help them by, offering them something better than where they're at.
So we've been kind of touched on, pay's been rising and the market's been changing. And it's been changing a lot. And, I guess within CRH, you're the guy that, when a CRNA wants a raise, when a locums guy is coming in, you're the guy that they talk to about rates and about all these things. So being the guy, do you have any tips for providers in general, like in the market, who is looking to ask for a raise or maybe a better compensation package in a polite and professional way? What's the best way to go about saying no to?
Yeah. So, I would say to, a shameless plug here for CRH is that the good thing is that we our rates and stuff are not under market. We pay our providers extremely well, so that helps us stand out apart from a lot of the competitors that we are constantly facing against in this space. Because as you mentioned, it's a very small space. So for CRH, we don't have to really have a lot of conversation about how to help educate or help our providers discuss compensation increases, because we're there. We pay what the market is worth for our providers in those particular territories. So, outside of CRH, what I would say is, if you're coming out of school, you're a recent student, you just graduated and completed your boards, and you're looking for your first time job. I think it's goes without saying that you could definitely get something for tuition assistance at most of these companies. When you're fresh out of school, you've got student loan debt, most of you do, and the biggest thing, at least from their perspective, is how do I get this paid off as quickly as possible? And so, working at a place, at an organization that is willing to pay towards that, or some level of commitment from the CRNA, I think is very, very worth that conversation. And most of the companies that are not, even if they're not advertising it, will still consider something like that. And so, I would be looking at something like that as a new grad. And then for experienced CRNAs, there's always opportunities if for whatever reason the place you're looking at isn't quite where you want it to be compensation wise. It doesn't hurt to have a conversation about a signing bonus or what merit increases or annual increases look like over the next 2 to 5 years, just to get a better understanding of where you could be in that role. I would not turn a place down simply because they aren't where I would like them to be on compensation right away. I would have a conversation and make it a two-way dialogue. I really want to be here. Here's what I would like. And you're going to get a lot further in your conversations and negotiations with an employer when you approach it that way, as opposed to immediately shutting it down because it's not what you would like on the first presentation of the compensation package.
Yeah, it's like I think the key there is two-way dialogue.
Yeah.
Because I've talked to many people that have been like, this is what I'm going to do only for this. And it's like, well, no, like just say, hey, this is what I would like, where do you guys fall on this scale? And, what can we do about it? And it's, you're able to reach a deal. Great. And if you're not able to reach a deal, then it's, thank you so much. I mean, it's not for me at the moment, but I'll probably circle back in 3 to 6 months. If you don't mind taking my call, we can talk again. And you never know where things will be in that time.
Yeah.
But the key is to me is just to be professional and be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I will sort of say, and maybe people don't think of it in this way, but there's sometimes a misperception that, recruitment or operations of particular companies, and I can't speak for all companies, of course, so take this for what it's worth, but at least, at CRH, I think a lot of times the misconception in the market is that we are trying to offer the lowest possible compensation package that we can get away with in hopes that someone will, take it. And then we can say, yes, we saved $10,000 or whatever it may be. And, I can say, at least for CRH, we don't operate that way. When we have conversations with candidates, we're very transparent about what the package is and how we try to keep that fair and, uniform across the market, especially at that clinic that they're going to be working at. So, while there might not be this large room for negotiations, if you will, or, the changing of the compensation package, there's still an opportunity for you to have a dialogue to say, hey, this is what I think that I'm worth based on my experience and this, here's what I can bring to the table, and having that open conversation with the recruiter or the, operations practice manager, whoever it may be. But, just know that it's not always trying to figure out how low we can offer somebody a position, if you will, in hopes that they'll take it and we can, celebrate behind closed doors, so to speak.
So celebrate with your martinis.
Yes. Oh, we did it. We got it. Yes. So,
well, and it's funny because like I've always been a big proponent of the golden handcuffs rule, and CRH definitely works on that because, like one of the things I kind of like is I've had many ideas and I've been like, hey, what do you think about doing something like this along the lines of 401k, or, if we did this, it might make our providers feel more appreciated. And, everybody in administration, which is really great, is always open to listen. And, and definitely in the time I've been with the company, I've seen a handful of things trickle down where I'm like, oh, I remember we talked about this. And, like, this is great. People like everyone listens.
yeah.
I just love when companies take care of their employees. And like, I feel like CRH really looks out for their providers, which is very nice.
Yeah, I agree. That is something that, to your point, is has definitely helped CRH stand out. I think the collaboration effort between operations and recruiting and the providers that we work with is something that's, at least from my experience, very, very hard to find. And so, that definitely helps us stand out in terms of what we can offer for future growth. So,
Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On-Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On-Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.